Hey guys, welcome back. We are now at the next step in our magazine project. Today is an asynchronous day, and I definitely hope that you guys got a chance to answer the discussion question and also take a moment to watch this video. As soon as this video is done, go ahead and move on to the next phase, which is today's objective. Today we're going to try to understand how to contrast fonts, colors, and sizes to your article headlines and cover lines, followed by grouping of text, using alignments. So then we're going to add a barcode and a date line. So basically what we're going to do is that we're going to create some articles, create a headline, create some cover lines as they're known, and then we're going to add some contrast to those elements using 2 font sizes and 2 colors. Okay, so as a quick recap, we should already be at step 1. So you should already have a masthead or title for your magazine. If not, you want to make sure you look at the yesterday's video or day 14 video to watch, get the information there. You can click onto the YouTube link or the chapters in the YouTube description to jump to that. Step 2 is that we created the document, and this is not a regular size piece of paper. It is a 11.5-inch height document. So please make sure that you see the dimension here. It says 8.5 width by 11.5. So it's the 11.5 that is very important. Okay. We talked about good central images, photos with symbols, photos that communicate symbolically to the viewer, to your audience. And that's really important. You can use your photos, you can use your drawings, you can use photos that have and Photoshop them into other things. You can use a combination, collages. It is open to anything and everything that you want to create, which is amazing. And of course, the discussion today is referring to this image. Why is this a bad central image? Like, what's wrong with this image, right? And so hopefully you got a chance to answer that question. And of course, the central images should always have that symbolism, and whatever you look at out there, you always tend to notice that magazines always have this way of trying to connect with the viewer, whether it's through the eyes, looking into the viewer's face, creating wacky images, clothing, even props, things in their hand. All these things have meaning. So whatever you select as an image or create, make sure that you're taking into account all the elements, all the outfits, all the poses, the gazes, where they're looking, the background, if they all have a meaning behind it that is trying to communicate with your audience, your reader. Okay. And we said that we're going to go off the center and apply rule of thirds, because anything that is off the center always looks more interesting visually, or asymmetrical, as we call it. The more asymmetrical we have something, the more beautiful it looks, the more interesting it looks, and the more it kind of invites the viewer into their world. And we always see that in cover designs. Okay, things are always off the center, and they're always off the center to look more visually interesting. But in magazine publications, they also make room for other articles as well. So going off the center does offer you an opportunity to use empty space or negative space to create articles and images. So they kind of work twofold. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk about how to create contrast with the headlines and the covers. And if we look at this cover magazine, this cover from Allure magazine, then what is the main headline is the 61 products you love, Reader's Choice Awards. This works graphically because at the end of the day, it's using 2 fonts and 2 colors within the image. So let's do that. Let's actually walk through this process and create some contrast so you can apply that into your own work. Okay, so let's go ahead, take a look, and see how we create the contrast. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. So you want to make sure you open up your Adobe Photoshop program in order for that to work. Okay, and we'll still be using Francesca's sample of thread and needle. And I'm still thinking about the viewer, about Victoria, and what her viewer is interested in, right? If I kind of quickly go back to the her profile, the persona of Victoria, then I know that there are things like she's trying to achieve, such as being successful at work, prove herself, and be essential to the company, improving her social life, getting out of the house, traveling the world. So those goals actually can serve as my articles, right? Even the bio can even say something. She's excited to bring her thoughts and perspective of fashion to inspire people within the fashion industry. Outside of the office, she is creative, likes to explore new music and art, enjoys reading fiction, and usually goes to a mall or retail store to add more clothes to her wardrobe. She's also appreciates spending time with friends and family. So her quote is, "I want to identify how fashion impacts our world and use it as a tool of expression." So these are all great descriptions of potential articles. And for me, I'm thinking to myself, what's going to be the main article? What's going to be the thing that is going to be like the central article for this, that is the headline? Well, the first thing I'm thinking to myself is like, well, I have to make sure that whatever it is that I'm about to create is connected to that central image, because the article should connect to that central image. And I think I alluded to that a little bit where I said, you know what, this image does look like that of a woman that is trying to communicate, collaborate, connect in the fashion world. It looks like she's traveling as well. So we can make the headline related to travel. We can make it related to both traveling and finding that inner voice. But we have an opportunity here, right? So I think the first thing that comes into my mind is like embracing new cultures, or if the quote says identify fashion impacts our world, I think I would want to do something related to that, like fashion and sustainability, or fashion and our world, or fashion culture and impact, or I like this idea of fashion as impact, or fashionable impact. Or fashionably impactful. So what I'm doing right now is basically coming up with ways to get the attention of the audience by using those ideas, right? So for me, I think it's more, I think what works is like fashion and impact, or fashion and sustainability, I think I like that more or less, fashion impacts our world is too long. So I want to do maybe fashion impact, or good fashion, or sustainable fashion. I think I like sustainable fashion because, going back to Victoria, 28, professional, stylish, creative. This is a very intelligent woman. And so I want to make sure that I'm speaking her language. So she would know about sustainability, right? Because a lack of sustainability is what frustrates her. So I think I like sustainable fashion as the article title, because it's short, sweet, interesting. Sustainable fashion. What does that mean? Is it sustainable as my business? Is it sustainable to the world? It's kind of almost curious in a sense. And so I'm going to get that and put that in there. So I'm going to come back to my horizontal type tool, and I'm going to try to enter that type where it's sustainable fashion. Okay. Now, the thing about this is that I always try to break it down and create some contrast. So I'm still using the same font as before, which is the Bebos font. But the focal point, or the central image, we know is going to be her, which is the photograph, right? And of course, after that is the name of the article. Now that I'm sort of tiling this, I feel like I could technically go a little bit bigger on the image now that my masthead, or the title of the magazine, has been created. So I'm going to take my central image here, and I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and I'm going to increase the scale of this image. If I zoom out, I can hold the Alt Option key and scroll up and down to zoom in and out. I'll see the boundary of my image, or the bounding box. And if I take a node or a corner and pull it up, then I can pull up, increase the scale, and move the image back into position, or position it so that she's taking, or the central image of the model is taking, a majority of the graphics. So I'm kind of really pushing that image of her a little bit closer. And I'm going to go Alt Option, hold it down, scroll in, to kind of zoom in on the image to kind of make it work. Looks a little better, looks a little bit more graphic. I could probably move it to the off center just a little bit more, increase the scaling. But I really want her to like stand out and have it be like this sort of fashionable thing. So now that I'm kind of thinking about sustainable fashion as an article title, I'm going to type it in sustainable fashion. Now I said we need to have 2 fonts, 2 colors possibly, but I'm going to try to create a contrast of size. And I'm going to come up to my character panel. I'm going to move my layers here off to the side a little bit. Actually, I'll move my character up and move the layer panel here so I can see a little bit of both. Move that up a little bit. See my layers at the bottom so I can kind of see 2 things here. Move it to the dock. Move it to the dock there. Okay. So I moved it over to the dock onto the right. And if you notice, it's snapped into place to create a character, a layers panel, and close panels there. And this is a great way to kind of see your panels tiled without having to move your image on the left or to the right, which is kind of nice. Okay, so sustainable fashion. So what I'm going to do with sustainable fashion is that I'm actually going to bring the tracking or the spacing in a little bit closer. So I'm going to bring it back to the zero tracking or original tracking so that I can see the font. And then what I'm going to try to do is I'm actually going to try to separate or take the word fashion here and make it a little bit bigger. I'm actually going to highlight the word fashion and go to my character panel and increase the size. Notice that my mouse is over the letter T here on the upper right hand side. So I basically have over here where my arrow is, these looks like an uppercase T and a lowercase t. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically clicking onto or hovering my mouse over the T, and you'll see like a little finger with an arrow key on the left and the right. And if I see that little arrow key, I hold the click and slide left and right, it actually increases the font size. So if I highlight the word fashion, go over to the T where the arrow is pointing, see the little finger with the left and right arrow, and I track to the right, it actually increases the size of the font. Okay, creating that contrast of size. Okay. The other thing I want to do is that I don't like the spacing of, if I zoom in on my type there. Whoops, excuse me. Okay, I kind of don't like the spacing of the between the word sustainable and the word fashion. So what I'm going to do, kind of like you do in Google Slides or Google Documents, mostly Google Slides, is that I'm going to take the text box, take my type tool on the left, and I'm basically going to click onto the text box, and I'm going to hold the click, and highlight the word. Okay. And the next thing I'm going to do here is that I'm basically going to take my arrow key, and we're going to point to this box here, which looks like 2 A's overlapping each other, and a little arrow key. Okay, if I hover my mouse over it, that is actually known as your leading, and the leading is this line spacing. It's interesting because Google Slides calls it line spacing and graphic designers call it leading. And I think for the future versions of Photoshop, we should call it line spacing because not everyone knows leading unless you're a professional designer. So if you ever hear line spacing or leading and line spacing mean the same thing. Okay, so if I go down to the drop-down menu, there's different points of spacing. Or if I hover my mouse over the A and the 2 letter A's and I see the little finger with the arrow pointing left to right, I can actually adjust the leading or the spacing between the lines left and right. So I can actually make it come closer, go a little bit faster. I like it closer because it shows that the 2 words are related, right? And I can even take this and increase the scale of the font by 1 or 2 points just to kind of create a little bit of like this container. I always like to take my fonts or my text boxes and kind of design these containers as you see in the red box. They don't have to, but they actually do help create some structure when they align. So whether it's right aligned, left aligned, as long as a part of the word is aligning or creating some type of structure, it's really, really helpful. So I like how I'm seeing this. I see sustainable fashion, and I'll probably add like a small secondary line here or an anchorage for visual interest, because sustainable fashion is a little bit, does arouse curiosity. But if I take my text box again, and let's try like a 12 or 14 point font. Oh, nope. If I take my text box again, click underneath it, and then change the font size to a 10 or 12 point, okay, then I should be able to get a good idea of what is an appropriate size. So, sustainable fashion. I'm going to go back to my profile of Victoria from New York, and I'm going to basically try to get creative in my writing and say like sustainable fashion. You know, how ways to make your designs ways to make your design globally impactful. Or fashion, sustainable fashion, fashion for global, let's see, global fashion, or good global fashion, or positive global fashion. Global fashion with impact. So that anchorage is kind of like a line that kind of talks to Victoria, that gets her attention. So you are kind of writing copy in a way that is going to be interesting to the viewer, and grabs their attention. So this is gonna require a little bit of trial and error, because I want to say the most with less words when I'm writing my articles, right? Short and sweet, short and sweet. So sustainable fashion, anchorage, global fashion with impact. So that's interesting. That looks impactful, right? And I'll even take this and add some color to it, because I have contrasting sizes, which is great, contrasting shapes because of the different fonts and letters in that, but the colors just don't really work, right? I could keep it black. What I really want to do is kind of add some color, right? And if you recall from yesterday, the color is black with blue and some highlights of red and teal. So, you know, if I want to be sustainable, maybe we can add some maybe some red and teal, right? So maybe I'll make the red the same color as the scarf using my eyedropper tool. And I know everyone's thinking like, how'd you do that? Well, I went to my type tool, I highlighted the word, went to my color selection here under character, clicked onto it. And even though I can select color here on my color picker, move it around, if I go outside the square in the menu and into the image, there's a little eyedropper. Looks like a little water dropper. That water dropper is the eyedropper tool. It picks up color. And so anywhere the tip of that water dropper goes, it changes it to the color, right down to like the skin. So the tip is going to go to the color red for the word sustainable, or maybe it'll go to blue, or maybe it'll go to the orange. Ooh, I kind of like the orange a little bit. But I do want it to be, I want to communicate sustainable. So And so maybe I'll go fashion big because the majority of the colors in the photo are black. So the biggest word is the majority of color. Sustainable is the second highlighted word or the second largest word. And then for the third largest font, which is global fashion with impact, I'm going to make that teal. Okay, I'm going to click OK to my color. I'm going to highlight global fashion with impact. Sometimes if it's hard to highlight, you can double click onto the T in the layer panel here on the right, where my mouse is flashing. Double click the letter T, highlights the word. So that's a really great way to highlight something. If you can't highlight something, just double click the layer. Click, and it'll highlight it. And then you can even zoom in onto the word and highlight it if you want. I'm just going to double click onto T for global fashion with impact, highlights it, go to color, eyedropper goes outside, pick up the color blue, boom. Looks kind of interesting. Global fashion with impact. Doesn't quite work. So I like the black. I really do like the black, to be honest. Maybe sustainable fashion, and then global fashion with impact, maybe red. Let's try that. It's possible. There are things I designed that just don't work. That's why you always constantly have to be looking, testing, trying. And it's looking interesting. I kind of like where this is going, right? I would say that for this one, I want to increase the scale. So I'm going to go to global. I'm going to go to the sustainable fashion layer, hold down my command key, highlight or click on to global fashion. And now I have both layers selected. Okay. If I go and to do that again, I'll show you. Highlight the one layer to text, hold down the command key, or I believe it's the Control-Alt for PC. Click onto the other text layer, and with your move tool, you can actually move both layers highlighted. That's called a like a multi-highlight or a selected layer or multi-selected layer. By holding down command and clicking onto the layers, I can select different layers. I can even go to edit, the edit menu, transform, scale, and I can increase the scale of the type a little bit bigger to kind of make it work within the graphic there. Okay. And maybe I can go maybe perhaps a little bit larger, edit, transform, scale. And I'll try to make that maybe the second largest article there, try to relate it next to her so that we can get a little bit more of a visual there to make it apply to the graphic. Okay. So we have that going on to add it. So now we created contrast, two font sizes, right? Two different font sizes, two different colors, and sometimes you can even contrast fonts altogether. But we never want to do more than 2 or 3 fonts in a project at a time, because too many fonts can look a little bit crazy, as you saw in the warm-up today or in the discussion post. So that's the idea, okay, towards creating contrast. So what you guys are going to do is basically, for your central image, create an article that relates to the central image, and create 2 or 3 more articles that are just like subtext in the same fashion, the same way, right? Contrasting sizes, contrasting fonts, contrasting colors, and then try to add it within the negative space of the image to make it work graphically, okay? And they'll typically be a little bit smaller. So if we look at the focal point is the woman. The second largest thing is the title of the magazine and the masthead, right? Then the third largest thing is the main or headline article related to the photo. And so you want that order to be the same in your project, okay? All right, guys, so that is it for today. Okay, tomorrow for asynchronous, we're still gonna continue making modifications, adding that barcode, and basically taking into account some of the designs and labels that we have going on in your article, okay? That does it for this lesson, and we will see you on our next asynchronous day, okay? Please continue to update, save, share those files, and I'll be monitoring, okay? We'll be ready for review on Monday. I'll see you tomorrow in the next post.